a little off the highway near Padal, Mangalore, morning mist. He went there, and in his own words, which were carried by so many publications later, he said that he did not find anything illegal. A few boys were there was a girl sitting in the balcony, and he asked in Tudu, he said, so what's happening? And before he knew it, a few men had barged into the homestay, started slapping around the boys, chasing the girls. One of them apparently ran, they still chased her. And as we know from some of the footage that came in later, she was stripped, molested, something that disturbed this television reporter greatly. While the debate in many fora, including Facebook, was on saying that why was he watching, but I'm just stating things as they are at this stage. He did make calls to the police, and there is evidence about that. His call was not received. The Sub-Inspector Rural of Mangalore, he called up his TV9 friend, who also called the police inspector, but that call wasn't received either. But by that time, something that was unfolding before his eyes, and in his own words, a chill down my spine, as he says. So what was he to do? He did what he did best, which is to shoot and cover the event as a journalist that he was. But what did he find? That his own name figured in the charge sheet, along with the same assaulters whose misdeed he had tried to cover and shoot. And as we speak, this 27-year-old journalist is still in jail for the 40th day. His bail plea has been rejected. It's coming up, the orders are reserved for today, having both sides' argument has been presented. The Karnataka High Court, the Honorable Court, I hope, will give the orders very soon, if not today, tomorrow, because otherwise it's going to be a longer time in jail for Naveen Suranjay because the court closes for Christmas vacation. I think the far-reaching impact of this case for not just journalists or aspiring media persons in this room is that somebody who was trying to do his job, because let's face it, if it were not for that coverage and if it were not for that shocking footage reaching subsequently the entire country and across the world, it might have been just dismissed maybe as a single column report. I don't know, because those who've been reporting on Mangalore or observing the region know that this is not a stray incident, nor is the attack on girls and boys, especially that belong to two different religions. That's not a new phenomenon. Mangalore has had these incidents of shame consistently. I had reported the 2009 infamous pub attack where girls were pulled out of the pub, and we all know that incident as well. So, the repercussions on reporting is what it is. But just before I pass on the mic to the next panelist, I wrote on Facebook, thanks to our friend Jairam, a link which I thought was very useful in telling us the big picture. Naveen Suranjay's case is not isolated. Those of us who interacted with him know that he is one ethical journalist. He has his own association in Mangalore, which is against gift-taking of journalists. So there's a certain track record there. He never went absconding as the police claimed. But more than that, the Committee to Protect Journalists, which is an international body, and Jairam had shared this link on my Facebook post. It says, and I quote, imprisonment of journalists worldwide reached a record high in 2012, driven in part by use of charges of terrorism and other anti-state offences against critical reporters and editors. The Committee to Protect Journalists has found it puts that statistics as 232 individuals behind bars as of December 1st, and that's an increase of 53 over the last year. It also goes on to record later that journalists who work on most sensitive issues are most vulnerable. With this, it's over to me. Dakshina, I guess? Padma.
I'm just going to read out the summary of Parshuram Tahsildar's various writings on the incident. He is a person who's right now with Janashri channel, but he's talking about an incident from 2 years ago, very similar to what happened to Naveen Suranjay. Let me just briefly explain what happened in 2010 September. he got a tip off from one of the Kannada organizations in Bidar that the Border Development Authority chief, then Chandrakant Bellad, was going to come and visit the area, and the Kannada organizations wanted to give a petition to him about the neglect of Kannada region, Kannada language, and the culture, and the whole issue that's there in the border areas of Karnataka. And they were going to give him a petition. So he, along with a couple of other TV journalists and some print journalists, after the tip-off, went there. There was no police presence whatsoever at that point of time, is what he says. And while he was there, when Mr. Chandrakant Bellad came out, some of the activists smeared his face with black oil and called out. They protested for about half an hour. Until then, there was no police presence at all. And after half an hour, when Mr. Tehsildar saw that the incident was going out of hand, he called the police, and they then showed up and dispersed these guys and all. And Tehsildar goes on to say that although Mr. Chandrakant was very upset about the whole thing, he did clean his face, come out and talk to the journalists and give a statement that he will look into the whole issue that the Kannada organizations are protesting about it. He says the conversation with him was absolutely amicable. He did not say anything that was an indication of what was to come. But 3 days later, Tehsildar got a call from one of the senior police officers and said, "Can you come down to the police station today? I need to talk to you about something." He had no clue what he was getting into. And he was out on some story, so he went there in the evening around 6 o'clock, and he was told that he has to be arrested because there is pressure that he was actually in cahoots with the kind of organizations in the whole blackening of the officer's face. So, and Tehsildar says that the police officer that spoke to him knew that this is not something that happened, but he said there is too much pressure from the outside, both government and the police department, to do this. So he was arrested, and the moment he was arrested, there were what Tehsildar gets upset the most about is the way it was reported in the other media. Immediately there were reports of him, the Kannada organization head who was part of this whole incident, him and Tehsildar being classmates, that they knew each other beforehand. All kinds of rumors got around, and there were very few people who were actually back him up. He doesn't specifically go into the fact that whether if his channel supported him or not, but from the looks of it, he did. So finally, a local friend, a doctor, bailed him out after a really long time, and he goes into the details of what kind of experience he had while he was in the police station, while he was in the jail. But this was 2 years ago, and he really, he struggled to get out on bail. But what he says is that during the entire time, the fraternity was not by his side. That's what he talks about most. He says the fraternity was not on his side. And he goes on to talk about various instances in which he exposed issues and got into the bad books of the government officials. He talks about one issue where Nelwadi village near Bidar again, where a particular community, the young girls and women were being raped by an upper caste community of mostly lorry drivers who drive through the area, pick up girls, young girls, rape them and give them back. And the police officials were from the same community as the lorry drivers. So they were not doing anything about it. But when Tehsildar reported about it, it became a big issue. Everybody was, and he was again in a not a very amiable position. So he relates various such issues in which he's been in a position of not great comfort because the organizations at the government departments were against him. He says he didn't talk about it earlier, but later when he did talk about it, he's written on Facebook and other platforms about this whole incident from 2 years ago. The case, there was no charge sheet against him after he was bailed out. The the blackening incident, there is no charge sheet against him. There is nothing. But 2 years ago, recently when he talked about it again, the case has been reopened, he says. And he doesn't know where it stands. He doesn't know if he has to go back to jail with the charge sheet, he doesn't know any of those details. He goes on, his biggest concern about the whole issue is how in his case or in Naveen Sunjay's case, there has been a clear divide in the fraternity from the media organizations. He says nobody is backing the journalist up. He or she is just doing their duty. What the media organizations that they work for, they should back him up is what he's most important.
Actually, we wanted Parishram to be here for the reason that over a decade. But this has taken into the fore for the reason that the government, which is running the state here, it is making, it is spreading the fear psychosis among the journalists. And Parishram, who underwent all these, actually now he is fearing how to work in this kind of circumstances. So that is why we wanted Parishram here and share his experience. And there are so many cases in and around in all the districts, but Naveen Surinjay, for the reason that it was almost parallel to this pub attack and other things, it came to forefront, and the police, they first tried to shut journalists' mouths, and then if they can't do that, then these kind of police cases will create a fear psychosis. And I can see in Bangalore, because I was there for 9 years, and there are two kind of unique things there. One thing is, Naveen Surinjay kind of journalists, they are completely isolated. From the journalist fraternity itself, because almost all the journalists, because they are with Hindu outfits and they almost act like activists of the outfit. Many who have interacted with the journalists there, they know how this press council there and other journalist organizations operate there. And second thing is this spreading fear psychosis. This has happened, and actually in his speech what he has sent to us, he describes after he coming to Davangere, he shifted his base from Bidar to Davangere. He is fearing to cover any stories of development and other things. And he cannot go for investigative stories for the reason that he fears that whether anything else will come on his head again. This is the thing. And now to Nidhi.
Namaskar. I'm a bit of an oddball in this room because I think I'm the only lawyer sitting in which media persons of all age groups and experience. But I have another cut-out task, specific task of, I suppose, why I'm called here, to speak about the legal implications and what really legally it means and what does Naveen Surinjay's case mean in a legal sense. I'm expected to be dispassionate because that's the only way I'm going to look into it. But for a moment, before I begin, I keep aside dispassionate, impartial outlook, being virtue aside, and openly express my personal position, predilections, or inclinations, call it what you will. I am a Bangalorean. I was born in Bangalore. My extended family has people who take pride in the fact that they break boys and girls who are from different religions. I don't know what I'm talking, Hindus and Muslims, not going to do that. I have a cousin who was part of the Karseva who demolished Babri Masjid and takes pride in it, of having gone along with Eddie Lothar and which team he led. So I am sure all of you are aware of the broader cultural and political context in which Naveen Surinjay's case has arisen, and I openly, passionately condemn that. And I'm extremely worried about my hometown, because all my family comes from there. And my extended family are all supporters of, most of them are supporters of, organizations like the Hindu Jagan Village. If my aunt and uncle were to be here, they would have been not very happy with what I'm doing now. So I'm very worried about Bangalore, Dakshina Kannada, old Dakshina Kannada as we call it, comprising Urdu region as well, turning into a Gujarat Gujarat in a specific sense.